I was always in her shadow, but I always felt safe there. It wasn't like I was, that's my big sister. I was proud that she was my big sister. Well, she was my matron of honor, and her husband gave me away.
So you were telling me about, not only was she with you in the delivery room, but she was with you when you had a heart catheterization?
Yes.
Okay.
She came out to be with me, and her comment then was, I thought it would be me and not you.
Oh. And y'all were close enough. You mentioned that you talk every single day.
Yes, we talked to the phone every day, every morning. We would check up on each other. There was one morning that we didn't talk.
That's mine, Anna. If you're watching on YouTube, to like and subscribe. If you are listening on the podcast, please like and follow. We would love for you to do that now to help our channel grow and become a blessing to others.
Okay, so another person that you lost in your lifetime that was very close to you was your sister. So she was your older sister?
Yes.
Okay, what was your relationship with her?
I think she was my protector, and she was always there. There were times when Mom and Dad were both working, and she'd take me to school, and she would pick me up, and if she had something to do, she just took me along. Oh. I remember asking her one time when we were, when both of us were older, and I asked her, I said, I must have been I was like 10 years old, and she was with her teenage friends, and I said, I must have been a brat. And she laughed, and she said, no, you weren't. She said, that's why I didn't mind bringing you with us. She said, you weren't, and she said, I was always glad to have you with me, which surprised me. I was,
I think that's older. Sweet. Every now and then you have relationships like that. I feel like the boys had that relationship where they drug each other, the younger one, around, and then didn't seem to mind. And then I've noticed that when you see that, it's such a sweet thing between siblings. That's precious. So she was, tell me about, what was she like? What was her personality like?
Completely different from me.
Mm-hmm.
I was always in her shadow, but I always felt safe there. It wasn't like I was, that's my big sister. I was proud that she was my big sister. She liked to hunt. She liked to fish. She liked to hunt with a bow and arrow. And wow. There was not anything along that line that she didn't like. When she was in high school, she was going to be a coach. She was on the basketball team in a large high school. And she did a flip over another person, and she actually broke her shoulder bone. And wow. Then she, when she was being checked out for everything else, they found that she had a heart murmur.
Okay.
So they told her that she couldn't go into athletics, which things may be different now, but that's the way it was then. So between that and the fact that her dad had chronic heart condition, she decided she wanted to be a nurse. When we went to camp, I was a camper, and she was the nurse guard. She had a T-shirt that said nurse guard. That meant that she was the camp nurse, and she was the camp lifeguard.
It's a double duty.
So that's just the way it was. I was always her little sister. But I liked being her little sister.
You enjoyed that
I
part.
did.
That was fine with you because you were probably the quieter one. Aw. And so what did you had made some notes about when you got married. What was her role in that?
Well, she was my matron of honor, and her husband gave me away.
Aww.
And they kind of made a joke of it because he had been in our life for 6 years after Daddy died, and he would tell my husband, you need to do this, you need to do that, and we said one day, well, he gave me away, but he kept trying to take me back. But he was a good role model. So.
Oh, I'm glad you had him, and it's special, when, like in your case where you had lost your dad, it's special to have those people who are there to mentor or be in. Not necessarily take their place, but just to help fill that void, like they did. That's wonderful. And then, what happened when you had your baby? And she was a nurse. That was a funny story, I thought.
She was a nurse at the same hospital, and she worked in the delivery room. And she worked with the doctor who was my doctor. And she told the doctor that she was going with me into the delivery room when I had my children. And the doctor at first said, well, that's not a good idea. Back then, when my first one was born, daddies weren't allowed in the delivery room, and nobody was allowed in the delivery room. And the doctor thought that because we were sisters, we were probably too close, and she didn't want anything, to go awry. But Madelyn showed up in her scrubs, and we went into the delivery room together, and the doctor had a call down the hall, and she said, I've got to go. This lady's having her fourth baby. She said, I'm going to have to leave you two together. You're going to be all right. And she went to the other lady who was taking a long time, and she came back and just in time to deliver the baby, and hand the baby to Madelyn and say, okay, you take over from then on. And she turned to us and she said, I apologize. She said, I thought this was a terrible idea, but you two didn't need me. So, but it was it was a good time for us.
That's a precious time to have her there and share that moment with you. So you were telling me about, not only was she with you in the delivery room, but she was with you when you had a heart catheterization?
Yes.
Okay.
She came up to be with me, and her comment then was, I thought it would be me and not you.
Oh.
I think because of Daddy's heart condition, the fact that she had a heart problem earlier, that she kind of expected that this, and being a nurse, she just kind of expected this. So that was her comment to me. Her husband died. They'd been married for 47 years.
Wow.
And they had gone to bed, were asleep, and he had gotten up and said he thought he would sit in the recliner for a little while. And she didn't get up with him because she said she went back to sleep, and when she woke up, she went in to check on him, and he had died during the night. And she blamed herself because she was a nurse, and she felt like she should have known something. She should have said something. And I saw a difference in her she lived 3 more years, and I saw a difference in her then. But she went back to work, and she worked at Duke, and she worked one day, and she called me that night, and she said, I asked her what she was going to do the next morning, and she said, I'm very tired, nothing, absolutely nothing, and just kind of joked about it, that she wasn't going to do anything the next morning.
And y'all were close enough, you mentioned that you talk every single day.
Yes, we talked to the phone every day, every morning. We would check up on each other. There was one morning that we didn't talk, and my nephew called me and said that he had gone by to see my sister. He was a fireman, and he had gone by on his way home to have his morning coffee with her. And he said that she had had a heart attack, and he just told me a little bit of what had happened, and said that he had called the ambulance, and he had gotten her back himself one time while they were waiting for the ambulance to get there. And I remember that the thing that I think that struck me the most is said that when they were in the ambulance, he heard the guy call it in, and he said, it's one of our own.
Wow.
Because she was a nurse at Duke and he was a fireman. And he said that really, touched her.
Yes.
But just the phrase, it's one of our own.
Wow. Because she had done so much community work for all of her, she was a nurse all of her life, right?
Right.
47 years then, roughly?
She was a nurse for 50 years.
For 50 years, wow.
She was in her 50th year.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. I mentioned one other thing that when we were talking about grief that struck me, my youngest grandson was 3 when Madelyn died, and he always said Aunt Mad when he hadn't gotten the name down yet, but he would say, I love Aunt Madelyn. And when we went to the funeral, his dad and mom were waiting to tell him and trying to find a way to tell him. We put him in the nursery during the funeral service.
Okay.
And on the way to the graveside, his dad had tried to explain things to him. When we were at the graveside, I heard him say, you always hear your own grandchildren.
Right.
I heard him say out loud, Daddy, is Aunt Madelyn in that box?
Oh.
And I realized then that he was processing everything. So later on, he told me, he said, Nana, my daddy should have told me when Aunt Madelyn died. He said, because I needed to be sad for her. He said, and I couldn't be sad for her.
Wow.
And I thought, if there's ever an expression of grief, that's
yes.
it.
Yes, I need to be sad
I need
for
to
her.
be sad. And so we talked about that. You can scrap this if you want to. And my sister said, we were talking about it later, and I am very close to this particular grandchild for several reasons. But Jennifer told me one day, she said, Mom, she said, don't die because Braden's going to get in that box with you. So, I mean, it's just, you have to see the humor in some
yes,
things.
exactly. You have to, I say you have to laugh now and then just to keep from always crying. I mean, to be honest.
So.
God gave us humor the same as he also gave us, the ability to be sad or to mourn. And that is oftentimes how we deal with it. And, oh my goodness, you're right. I've learned so much from like you said earlier, interviewing the grandchildren, about Don's grief, and then like you explaining things that they said. And it is hard to know. So I think it's helpful when we share how the kids reacted or what happened, because your natural reaction as a parent or grandparent is to shield them from everything you can, and you don't want them to experience the hard times and the bad feelings and the hard feelings and the sad. But it's something to think through and talk about, because I think it's also very dangerous if a child, like you said, from your childhood, if you're not allowed to process grief or you're not allowed to talk about your feelings. And I remember grandchildren being, when Don passed, being very just abrupt about it, as in, oh, okay, he's not here, he's in heaven. And also feeling just precious in the way they would reassure us, well, we know they're in heaven, so everything's fine. And so sometimes, a child grieving alongside you or helping them with their grief is even good for the parents or the grandparents or whoever's going through something. So I think that's important to understand. You were telling me about something special with, well, first of all, I want to go to this. You said Don, who was my husband that passed away, but was your pastor at the time that Madelyn died. In fact, I do remember specifically. I remember the other, Troy's death happening and so forth, but I remember specifically like you calling me or me calling you, something like that, around the time of Madelyn's death, and you telling me like what happened that day, and that just sticks out. I don't have a great memory, but that sticks out in my mind as something that we shared that day. But you said, tell me what it was. Of course, Mr. Wokaty, or Bob as you'll call him, worked there at the church, worked with Don, and Don was checking up on how you were doing after Madelyn's death.
They were talking one day, and this was after we had gotten back, and Bob came home and he said, Don asked about you today. He said, Pastor Don asked about you today, said he wanted to know how you were. And as long as all of us have been together, I think my pastor knew me. And he asked Bob how I was doing, and Bob said, she's quiet. And I said, and what did I say? And he said, he understood. And I just thought that was I don't know, that was just precious to me. That my husband understands me enough to know that when I go quiet, then I'm processing everything and just leave me alone.
Right.
And my pastor understood
Knew that too.
What I was going through.
Yeah, because I think that was his personality, so he probably could he could empathize, sympathize both with you on how to process it. So, spiritually speaking, I know Madelyn was older when she passed, as far as, she was young to die, but a good full life. And what kind of things have come out of that for you, though, with spiritual lessons or missing your sister?
I still miss my sister, and I always will, but I think I realized that I relied on her too much. If there was something wrong with one of my children, I got on the phone and called her. Mm-hmm. And, any little thing, I got on the phone and called her. And I know even when we were on our way to Durham, and my nephew had called me or had texted me and said, she would always call and say, how close are you? When will you get here? Mm. And my nephew had texted me and he said, how close are you? When are you getting here? And my husband asked me, he said, who was that? And I said, Madelyn. And he said, and he looked at me and he said,
Madelyn?
He just looked at me and he said, well, what'd she say?
Send a message from heaven.
And I looked at her, I said, she says it's very pretty there. Or it's beautiful there. And then we both laughed because I realized I was so used to her calling. And then I said it was little Mike. He asked the same thing, when will you be there? But I realized that there is no one person that you can turn to. It has to be the Lord. And I've survived. Mm-hmm. I miss her. I always will. But I think I have learned that the Lord tells us He's going to be our sufficiency.
Right.
And He is. He's more than enough. So.
Wow, that's a big life lesson to learn from it. And that's, I have to say that I hope that's one of the things that people take away from listening to people's stories about what they've been through and how they're processing, is that, even though grief is awful and it's life-changing, it doesn't go away, God uses the suffering and the hard circumstance if we'll let Him, and somehow in it He teaches us more about Himself, or draws us closer to Him than maybe we've ever been, and that would be the goal. And that I'll reiterate that now. The goal of discussing this is not to sound like there's no hope, but to be transparent about how awful it is and how raw, to be transparent that we need to grieve and talk about it. But what I also hope that everybody gets from these stories is that, God is sufficient. God will give you what you need to go through this journey, and He will not only bring you through it, He will allow you to learn of Him and communicate that to others.